In the early 1980s, a Canadian band burst onto the music scene with a sound that went on to define an era. This is the story of Loverboy and their iconic hit Working for the Weekend, and of course, given that it's SNL's 50th anniversary weekend, we also got to talk about the iconic skit from the show that made use of the song and gave the band some great publicity. If you guys just want to know about the skit from SNL, check out the chapter marker below on the video timeline. Before we get started, be sure to hit the bell notification icon and put all notifications on. I hear from a lot of my subscribers that they don't even get notifications when I post my videos. I would greatly appreciate if you guys did that, in addition to, of course, watching my videos and sharing my content. Our story begins a few hours, actually, from where I live, Calgary, Alberta. In 1979, guitarist Paul Dean and drummer Matt Frenette had just left their previous outfit Streetheart with a vision of creating something new. They soon crossed paths with vocalist Mike Reno from the group Moxie, in addition to keyboardist Doug Johnson and bassist Scott Smith. They formed the outfit that became Loverboy. The band's name came to Dean in a dream that was inspired by a late-night hangout with his bandmates and their girlfriends. After seeing a CoverGirl advertisement, the concept morphed from Coverboy to Loverboy in Dean's subconscious. With the name and a lineup in place, Loverboy was ready to take their music to the masses, but the road to success was not an easy one. Despite their enthusiasm and talent, Loverboy faced rejection from every American record label. It seemed that their dream might be short-lived, but fate had other plans. Enter Jeff Burns, the A&R vice president at CBS Canada. Burns had heard something special in Loverboy's demo and flew from Toronto to Vancouver to meet the band. His faith in their potential proved to be a huge turning point in their career. Burns offered Loverboy a deal with Columbia Records of Canada, providing them with the resources to work with producer Bruce Fairbairn and engineer Bob Rock. On March 20th, 1980, Loverboy entered the studio to record their self-titled debut record. The album was released later that summer, and it quickly became a sensation in their home country of Canada, as it sold nearly 1 million copies. An American release followed in November of that year, eventually selling 2 million copies stateside. The band's first single, Turn Me Loose, climbed all the way to number 7 on the Canadian charts and number 35 on the Billboard Hot 100. Loverboy had officially arrived. With the support of manager Bruce Allen, Loverboy soon embarked on a pretty grueling tour schedule. They're playing 200 shows in their first year, but they shared the stage with some pretty big acts like Cheap Trick, ZZ Top, Kansas, and Def Leppard. As Loverboy's popularity soared, they began work on their second album, Get Lucky. It was an album that was mostly assembled in dressing rooms while on the road. It was during this time that Paul Dean, Matt Frenette, and Mike Reno collaborated on a song that became the group's most enduring hit, Working for the Weekend. The song captured the spirit of the 80s, celebrating the anticipation of the weekend and the desire for romance and excitement. The song's catchy melody and energetic rhythm made it an instant crowd pleaser. Everyone's watching to see what you do. I think it's become commonplace to hear pretty much every radio station celebrating a Friday by playing the song in anticipation of, well, the weekend. The song originated when guitarist Paul Dean was walking out around near his house where he lived one afternoon. He noticed much of the area was pretty deserted, as most people were, of course, at work. He recalled, "So I'm out on the beach wondering, where is everybody? Well, I guess they're all waiting for the weekend." According to Dean, he first began writing the song in a hotel room following a Montreal show. At the time, the band was playing some pretty small venues like bars, and they had very few patrons actually watching their shows. It was after writing the song, the band noticed that the dance floor became packed, and Reno recalled how guitarist Paul Dean had written most of the song, and then he himself came up with what helped finish it. Reno recalled, "Paul sometimes starts a song and sometimes I start a song. In that case, he had the chorus, he had this line because everybody's just waiting for the weekend. And I started playing around with it, and as soon as it came up, I went, because everybody's working for the weekend." And he just stopped everything and went, "Oh, wow, that's so much better." He said, "That's it, that's the title." So that's how it happened. The song was issued as the lead single from their album Get Lucky in 1981. The song peaked at number 29 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. The success of Working for the Weekend propelled Loverboy to new heights. They became one of the first bands featured on this new fledgling network called MTV, with their music videos getting in heavy rotation. The band's popularity soared, and they transitioned from an opening act to a headliner. Keep in mind, MTV was still fairly new, and bands were still wrapping their heads around the concept of what to do in a music video. The song's popularity extended far beyond its initial chart run. It became a staple on rock radio and has also been featured in numerous TV shows, films, and commercials over the years, in addition to video games.
You want a piece of my heart? You better start from the start.
VH1 later ranked Working for the Weekend at number 100 on their list of the 100 greatest songs of the 80s. Most famously, the song appeared in the Adam Sandler movie Click, which also starred Terry Crews. And of course, one of my favorite films, Zoolander, as well, also featured the song.
Surprise!
Working for the Weekend also got a reimagining when it was licensed by the job-seeking website Indeed.com, and even IHOP licensed the song as well.
You want a piece of my toast? That's why we love you the most.
American guitarist Paul Gilbert included an instrumental cover of the song as his first track on his 2014 album Stone Pushing Uphill Man. Ron Burgundy, meanwhile, portrayed by Will Ferrell, performed a parody version of the song on Conan O'Brien's Late Night Show, suggesting he had been asked by Rob Ford to cover the song as Ford's campaign for re-election as the mayor of Toronto.
Oh, and the last thing was Olivia Gondak. It says that I wanted to eat her Olivia Gondak. I've never said that in my life tour. I would never do that. I'm happily married. I've got more than enough to eat at home. Thank you very much.
Anything that was true?
He's a controversial figure, and
He's
you were
controversial because he's so damn honest.
Everybody's going off the deep end. Don't do anything stupid, Rob.
Loverboy's success was not just limited to North America. They became the first Canadian rock group to earn Columbia Records' exclusive Crystal Globe Award, which celebrated the sale of over 5 million albums internationally. Let's now talk about the band's connection to Saturday Night Live. So in 1983, Loverboy actually appeared as a musical guest on SNL, and they played Working for the Weekend on that episode.
Want a piece of my heart? You better start from the start.
In 1990, Working for the Weekend made a reappearance on SNL, even taking the band members by surprise. I'm of course talking about the Chippendales audition skit. The skit aired in season 16 on episode 4 with guest host Patrick Swayze on October 27, 1990. Patrick Swayze and cast member Chris Farley are auditioning in front of 3 Chippendales judges for a vacant spot at the establishment. The sketch famously used everybody's Working for the Weekend.
I want to say once again that either one of you would make a fine addition to the Chippendale family. I wish I could just flip a coin and be done with it, but we can't. We're Chippendales.
The judges contrast the muscular body of Swayze versus Farley's overweight figure, really making the whole thing absurd. I always love how Farley looks a little bit behind Swayze in the routine, and I always get such a good laugh out of Farley's strut as the routine begins and his shirt opens. I want to point out that this was Chris Farley's 4th episode as an SNL cast member, and the Chippendales sketch was the first sketch where he was actually a main character. The Chippendales sketch has long been considered one of the show's most beloved sketches in their history, and it's honestly one of my favorite too. SNL cast member Kevin Nealon, who plays one of the judges, said it was one of the hardest times he's ever had keeping a straight face. He remarked, "It was one of the most difficult sketches I had ever had to be in without laughing. To keep from breaking, I stared at Farley's stretch marks. I was rearranging the marks into words in my mind to kind of distract me." Nealon added that Farley had some reservations about the skit because it did make fun of his body, but because he was a team player, he ultimately decided to do it. Another judge, played by Mike Myers, said in the 2015 documentary I Am Chris Farley that he had to resort to a tight-lipped, quizzical expression that he described as, and I quote, a dog hearing a weird frequency to keep it together. As for what Loverboy thought of the skit, Mike Reno admitted that the band had played a gig the very night that episode aired, and he was in his hotel room after the show packing up his belongings to go to the next gig, and he had the TV turned on. He was a huge SNL fan and saw the skit, and he claimed it was pretty normal back then for networks like NBC to not even bother licensing the song before airing skits or episodes, and they would just get the rights to the song and pay royalties after the fact. Reno claimed he loved the sketch and it almost made him pee his pants. Chippendales sketch was written by Jim Downey, who said he was inspired by Patrick Swayze's physical physique and dancing skills as demonstrated in the 1987 film Dirty Dancing. Sadly, Farley, Swayze, and Jen Hooks, who played one of the judges, have all since passed away. And looking back, the skit seems to have a mixed legacy with a lot of the alums of SNL. While it's been still heralded as one of the greatest sketches in the show's history, Farley's former friends and cast members seem to have mixed feelings on it. In the 2015 documentary I Am Chris Farley, comedian and friend Tom Arnold recalled that in the days leading up to the sketch, Farley had confided in him that he had reservations about doing it because he didn't want to be known as the fat guy. Meanwhile, writer on the show Bob Odenkirk detested the skit. Him and Farley had collaborated together as members of Chicago's Second City comedy troupe, and Odenkirk served as a writer on SNL between 1987 and 1991.
Yeah, you always were critical of that sketch, the famous sketch with Patrick Swayze, where Chris gets up and uses his belly and his body, and the joke basically is he's fat.
That Chippendales sketch is kind of unique. Chris didn't feel like he was on sure footing at SNL yet. That was the first big sort of present moment for him. So if it hadn't been the first one, that might have made it a little less egregious to me. But it was. Maybe it's just me watching it, but I always felt like that moment where he pulls his shirt off, there's almost a hesitation I see in his eyes. And even the smile or the kind of expression on his face, I just get a queasy feeling that he knows a good chunk of this reaction is because of my body shape. And he's loving the laugh. He's loving the reaction that he knows he's going to get because he got it anytime he did that or anything like it. But he's feeling like Chris would walk around saying, I'm going to use words you're not supposed to use. I'm a re. And fatty fall down, he would say all the time. He would fall down and say fatty fall down. And things like he would refer to himself with derogatory terms. And so just that moment, I just hated that moment. I still do. I wish it hadn't been the first big thing that happened to him. And I don't like that, people pretend that somehow the big laugh from that sketch was the concept of it, which was the judges can't really say why Patrick Swayze is a better Chippendales dancer than Chris Farley. I get it that's the joke, but there are people, the audience is responding to his physical.
Even former cast member and comedian Chris Rock shared a similar sentiment, saying, I have always hated it. The joke of it basically is we can't hire you because you're fat. But writer Jim Downey and former SNL writer Robert Smigel defended the skit, claiming it was empowering rather than degrading, since the judges thought that Farley was a serious contender the whole time.
Like, what was amazing about the sketch and what people forget is that Farley was incredibly nimble. He was an athlete, and he danced incredibly well in that sketch, actually.
He was
funny.
And
he had this fantastic energy, and like, in a way, it was like a very empowering sketch. And I think that's what people felt the first time they watched it. Like, look at this guy go and be completely proud of, unashamed and just going for it.
I thought it was, I think it showed off what a great physical comedian he was.
He's an amazing physical comedian.
According to Farley's agent, Doug Robinson, That Chippendales sketch is what led him to being signed by talent agency Creative Artists Agency. It always seemed painful to be a guy like Chris Farley because he always seemed like he had to be on at all times and make people laugh, kind of like Robin Williams. It reminded me of when Olivia Wilde was on Howard Stern's show and she recalled meeting Chris Farley when she was just a kid at an SNL after party.
You went there as a little girl, right? Your parents took you to a taping.
I went there as a little girl because, I went as a treat. It was my birthday treat.
Wow, your parents did have influence.
Well, they knew Lorne Michaels from like New York in the 70s days.
Right.
And
that was your birthday present?
Yeah. Someone who was most definitely in the cast was Chris Farley. And I ended up at a brownie table with him at the after party. At this point, I was like well into my chubby, weird 50-year-old lady stage.
Were you really chubby?
I was chunky. I was just like, there were no corners on my body.
Right.
And I was standing by the cookie brownie table, and I was a little insecure about it. And I was eating by myself.
You were eating a brownie?
I was eating a brownie, and Chris Farley came up to me, and he locked eyes with me, and he took a brownie and shoved it in his mouth. And then without breaking eye contact, took another brownie and shoved it in his mouth. And took a total of 10 brownies and shoved, and then started pounding his mouth, like pounding and like, Wah! And
Were you
I was
cracking
in
up?
hysterics. And he did that because he recognized that, like, I was a little insecure, and he, was like, hey, another little fat kid.
Despite the changing musical landscape, Loverboy has continued to perform and record, and as of 2024, the band achieved a pretty remarkable milestone. They sold over 15 million albums worldwide. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again in Rock Culture Stories. Take care.
Well, actually, there's one thing in heaven that Chris Farley won't do with me.
I know exactly what you're talking about.